So I'm going to talk a bit more about this crank hub and this bolt. So I've actually gone through 3 bolts now, messing this thing up, and I finally got everything within specifications. So if I rotate this around, you'll see that seems to be the max. And that's about the min. So that's 4/1000th of an inch, which is 0.1 millimeters, which is within specification. So that's a very happy place to be. So let's take this off. And let's put the dial indicator on here. So there's a very small amount of runout on this, but it seems like two or 3 thousandths. So let's discuss this whole issue. So if you look at aftermarket parts for the N55, what comes up very often is these special crank hub devices, which have got sprockets built, the sprockets for the timing chain and the oil pump drive built in, and sometimes you even get these crankshafts with the sprockets already machined on. And people are selling these because this bolt is supposed to come loose at high horsepower. Now, from an engineering design perspective, I don't see how that could be possible, because if you calculated that this thing has sufficient force to prevent the timing chain from moving, then the timing chain sprocket cannot move, and the bolt cannot come loose. So I don't really understand. People say that the sprocket creeps and the engine goes out of time. I don't understand how that could be possible, and it doesn't seem to be possible because that's the design. But then I thought, well, what happens if this hub is off center? Now BMW specifies 0.1 millimeter off center. Now when I put this hub first in, it was out by over 0.2 millimeters, which is quite a large amount at 8,000 or 7,000 RPM. So what's going on here is when you reassemble this engine, you're never going to get this centered. Maybe in the factory they were perfect, but once you take it apart and put it back together, I don't see these coming center again. Now, to get mine centered was a bit of a black art. So I've drawn a diagram of the crank hub, and what I did to get this thing centered is I mounted this in the chuck of my lathe, off center, in just the right orientation and off center, to be able to machine this back face here. And I use my CBN tool again. And that gave me a little bit of off kilter to be able to play with it, and then I was able to get it centered. And the other problem I had is that this bolt was very difficult to tighten up, and it had jaggedy movements, so it was springing and then stopping, and it wasn't tightening up smoothly. And the reason is because the previous bolt had galled this front face here, so I had to machine the front face as well to get rid of the galling from the previous bolt. And then I had to use this. So here's Permatex anti-seize, and there's the product number. And I put this on the flange of the bolt, and they made it, along with the machining, made it tighten up more smoothly. So, and then of course I had to machine the wear ring off around the outside. So there's 3 machining operations I had to do on this to get it right. And I don't even have a procedure for you for how you can get this centered, because right now it's kind of centered by pure luck. But if I were to take it apart and put it back together exactly the same way, I don't think it would be centered. There's all sorts of things going on here in terms of stresses and the bolts. The bolts actually, this center bolt is actually not a precision bolt, and it's not completely straight. So how people get this centered, or maybe they're not even checking if it is centered, I have no idea. I managed to get mine centered. It was very difficult. I suggest you do it when the crank is out of the block. When you have your crank, when you're polishing your crank, make sure that the sprockets can bolt up and be perfectly centered. But it is very worrying to me that there is no way of getting this centered that's a form of procedure which, you know, for rebuilding an engine where you can actually have any kind of certainty that it will get centered, because I certainly found this to be very far off. Now the other problem is that the old vibration damper was very far off center, because what had probably happened was it had warped off center over time and then kind of centered itself. And I think what's happening is people are reassembling their engines. The hub isn't exactly center, and their old vibration damper is even worse. So if your luck is bad and you've got a vibration damper that's very far off center, your radial forces at high RPM are going to be huge. And this is probably what causes the sprockets to creep and go out of time. So I don't think there's any problem with bolts coming loose or anything like that just on their own. I think it's because these balances are not perfectly centered when the engine is reassembled, and that is why the bolts come loose and the sprockets start to creep. So anyway, that's something to look at. I couldn't find any information on whether people check the runout of their hub. The ISTA says 0.1 millimeters, but I cannot even find anything referencing where they say where you should measure it or how. It makes sense that they would specify a very tight tolerance like 0.1, because it's a high RPM engine, and you've got a cantilever effect with a very long snouts from the main bearing up to this point. There's a very long snout, and the slightest bit off can cause very large forces on the mating surfaces of the sprocket with a crankshaft. So anyway, that's what I have to say about that. Now there is a piece of equipment you can buy to bolt over this hex nut, and this will actually keep the hex nut from backing out. Of course, it doesn't stop the whole thing from spinning, but I'm actually going to get that as a precaution, and they're only $40 on eBay, and you basically bolt this in after you've put your balance, your vibration damper on, and that stops it from from the nut from ever turning. So it's kind of like an aircraft anti-back out bolt thing. I think that's all I wanted to say about this. So just to give you an idea how difficult this was, I've taken this hub out about 20 times now and orientated in different ways and done my machining operations and all sorts of things. And it was very, very difficult to get this centered. So I have no idea what other people do, and I'd like to hear from all of you, so please comment and let me know.